Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with yet another Tim May podcast, an aptly named podcast, I do believe. And this another special edition for want of another term, because I've got a special guest on. I've been looking forward to having on for a while to explain this phenomenon known as JT Tuimoloau. And who better to talk about him than his high school coach, his former high school coach now, right, Dominic Daste?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, but Dominic Daste is joining me on my podcast from way out in Washington State. And Dominic, let's just jump right into it. Why is this guy considered maybe the best or one of the top three recruits in the country for the 2021 recruiting season, which, by the way, with him committing just finished. But what just jumps out about this guy that makes him that special, in your opinion?
I think when you talk about the whole package in terms of, obviously he's a great player, right? But he's a good student. He's a really good person. The day and age now where coaches are tied to the guys they recruit and they have to put their butt on the line in terms of academics and character and things of that nature. I don't think you have to worry about that with anything with JT. And so, obviously there's a physical piece, right? Which is, he's special. You can't teach 6'6" and arm length and speed to power and all those kinds of things that, all the buzzwords people talk about. He has all those. So, but at the end of the day, it's the stuff that's off the field that it makes him really special, I think. And he's such a humble kid. His family has done a great job raising him and stuff. And so I think when you talk about who he is off the field, he's a great student, and who he is as a person, as a young man. Is really what makes him a really, really special kid.
What was your office? Well, guys really didn't get to travel and do a lot of This has been the strangest recruiting season of all time, hasn't it? The last 2 years.
Yeah, it really has. Leading up to the start of the pandemic, obviously, our school's pretty busy. We're very fortunate to have a bunch of good players. It's the only thing that makes me a good coach is good players.
Yeah, exactly.
And so our school's pretty busy, right? We have guys going by all the time. And so Ohio State has another one of our kids in G. Scott. And so they're obviously familiar with our school and how we operate and stuff. So it's usually a pretty busy place, but the pandemic has kind of shut it down. And a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings like on Zoom and Teams.
Yeah. And so was that easier or much tougher to deal with from your vantage point? I mean, from your situation there, trying to, because I know high school coaches like to coordinate things to a certain extent to keep some civility to it all. But how tough was it watching him be recruited in the Zoom pandemic era?
I think it takes a toll on you, right? I mean, I think the normal recruiting obviously can be tough, but trying to coordinate all these meetings, and I think it just takes a toll on him. Family or young man who's 17, 18 years old. And, you're making a big decision for you and your family, but it's hard when you're not getting all the information, probably a little frustrating, I would guess. And so, but, everybody was dealing with it a little bit, right? The kids before JT's class really didn't get recruited at all, you know? So he's in a great situation, which he's made for himself.
Hey, how did you help them sort of sort through that from the coach's standpoint? Like you just said, I mean, even before JT, the year before, I mean, what did you just keep telling them, when they would get in on maybe Zoom meetings or things like that, where people are trying to sway them one way or the other? And, recruiting is recruiting, It's one of the great salesman jobs out there, or one of the worst, depending on your point of view, But what did you just tell them to watch for, that little tips or whatever? Give people an idea behind the scenes there.
I guess I have a little bit more insight, I guess. I don't know. I coached collegiately for 15 years and I came to Eastside Catholic. And so I've been on both sides of the table trying to get people to commit or doing what I do now. And so the biggest thing I told JT is you have to be happy as to where you're going, right? There is some business aspects to this, but the worst thing that can happen is you wake up every day and you're not happy with where you're at, who's coaching you, the people around you, right? Everybody who's talking to you is going to have great facilities. they're all going to have nice uniforms. They're all going to have the tangible things, right? But the people are what make the place. And so, the coaches, trainers, and that's the hard part, right? Because you can't visit campus, you can't meet those people. And so, I may get ran out of town here soon, considering I went to I went there, but I try not to give an opinion on specific schools. I just try to help them navigate the process and how to come to an informed decision.
Yeah, most people maybe don't know this, but you played at University of Washington. You went to University of Washington right down the road, and that how tough is that to be? Because you have alumni blood, but then you also have this brotherhood blood. With the young men you coach. How tough is it to try to be neutral, for want of another term?
Because I'm good friends with some of the guys at UW, right? And they understand the business part of it. I probably get the most grief from former teammates. After that decision came down yesterday, I got some funny texts as to, what the hell are you doing over there? And things of that nature. I think when you've coached a little bit, you kind of get removed from, having that huge attachment to a place.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I love UW and I have a huge attachment, but when you get to know the people, we have, 100 coaches coming out through the year, and you get to know them, you become friends with them. And so those relationships, mean a lot too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was born in Alabama, raised in Alabama and Texas, went to Alabama home games. And, everybody thinks just because that was my favorite team when I was a kid, it endures. But when you become a sports writer, believe me, you see behind the scenes, you don't really have a favorite anymore. But I wouldn't, but it's still hard for people to understand, especially when Ohio State plays Alabama last year. You're rooting for. So really, I'm rooting for the game to be over really fast, for deadlines, et cetera. But I digress. Jumping right into it. JT talked about the brotherhood of the players at Ohio State. He finally, and the thing about it is everybody was sort of wondering what's going on as a recruitment, but he was taking your advice. Or maybe his family's advice too. Hey, I want to see this place before I, decide that's where I want to spend my next 3 or 4 years. As he said, he did come out and have a great visit at Ohio State, but that was smart on his part, right?
I think so. It's just, it's hard because I think he knew in his mind he was getting behind a little bit in terms of conditioning and working out with his future teammates, wherever that may be. But he had to make an informed decision for himself, right? Yeah. He had to make sure that the place he was going to spend, hopefully 3, 4, 5 years or whatever it may be, that it was the right place for him and his family. And,
how can you hold that against anybody? Really, in the strangest of times. How much have you gotten to know either by Zoom or phone calls or maybe even, I don't know if Larry Johnson, did he finally get out there face to face? Yeah.
Larry came out before the pandemic started. Him and Coach Day and Coach Hartline, who recruited through G. I was a graduate assistant when Tony Alford was at University of Washington, who was one of the best people in the world.
Yes.
And so I was familiar with the staff and Larry is so genuine, right? I didn't spend a bunch amount of time with him, but you can tell right away he's just a good person, right? He's a very genuine and authentic person. And as you alluded to earlier a little bit, as the recruiting process can be sometimes the hardest job, or a little bit of a used car salesman, right? That's the opposite of what he is.
Yeah, I was going to say, he pretty much tells it as it is. I admire the man for all kinds of reasons, but one of it, the man never says a cuss word. That's hard to believe. You're a football coach and never say a cuss word. But that's his approach. But his reputation as a defensive lineman guru, from your vantage point, how much did that play a part in this too? The people Ohio State has put into the National Football League. For example, the list is long. It kind of is the flip side. I go, well, I would have been a hell of a track coach if I coached Jesse Owens. But it takes two to tango in that regard. But how much do you think that played a role in this? Just his track record.
I think it has a lot to do with it. I think JT has aspirations of playing in the NFL. And so you're going to probably want to go to a teacher that has a track record of making guys NFL caliber players. And so I think all the schools that he was being recruited by probably had that ability. But when you talk about recruiting, I think it's the connection you make with the people. Going back to Larry, I know he had a great connection with all the guys he recruited, but there was something special about his relationship with Coach Day, probably the whole staff at Ohio State.
Yeah, I was going to say, explain to me Ohio State's presence out there, because that's a long way away from Columbus, Ohio, even by plane. But
Yeah.
Can you explain what's kind of going on? I mean, Emeka Egbuka, like you talked about, G. Scott Jr. G. Scott Sr. is one of my favorite people, and I know you've met him. And but explain to me what's going on there.
I think when you start talking about Ohio State and the upper echelon schools around the country, I mean, they have a brand regardless of where you're at, right? What part of the country you're in, their brand touches you, right? They're on TV. And I think the day and age has even changed. I'm old, but I guess we're talking about 20 years ago. I didn't have the relationship with recruits in my area like the kids do now, right? Because of training and off-season conditioning and 7-on-7, or whether it be AAU basketball that they all play and all that kind of stuff. All these kids know each other now, right? So there's this network and there's this relationship all these guys have, and it's really cool to see because they are kind of pulling together. And I think Emeka and G probably recruited each other a little bit to Ohio State, and I know they both recruited JT to Ohio State. So I think all those relationships have changed over the years and how people communicate in terms of social networking and all that kind of stuff. So the world has obviously gotten smaller, but I think Ohio State's brand touches everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say they recruit heavily. Well, they recruit hard in the state of Texas, but they target guys. They don't necessarily throw a blanket out there. They just kind of go in, and I'm sure that's what they did with G. Scott Jr. and JT. Hey, JT as a basketball player, what's his upside there in your opinion from what you've seen?
I mean, I've seen him do some things in a basketball court that 265 pounds shouldn't be doing, right? And so he's, I think regardless of what he does, he's really, really good at it, right? A couple years ago, we always go to Boise State for camp. And along the way, we take a big bus and all that stuff, but we stopped and had kind of a bowling tournament, right? JT's before, and he goes out and bowls like a 260 or whatever. And he's just one of those guys who I think stuff comes naturally to him. But in terms of basketball, I think his hand-eye coordination and some of that aggressiveness in football, he plays basketball like a football player a little bit, right? He's physical, and underneath him in the block, he's aggressive and still has the finesse and touch to put the ball in the hoop.
I was going to say he'll fit right in the Big Ten. I mean, I just remember when Orlando Pace was being recruited, he also played basketball, and he pretty much came down as just a football player. But can you imagine Orlando Pace in the middle in the paint?
Need to widen the paint.
Oh yeah, they'd be running out the paint. Hey, well, last couple of things. I asked you a while ago about your alma mater and how tough it was when they come around and stuff. But is it amazing to you how national, universal and national recruiting is anymore? That even kids in Ohio leave Ohio to go elsewhere, type thing. And this idea that I've always said, the dotted lines are the only thing that make that an issue. The dotted lines on a map and stuff. But is that amazing to you? I mean, like you said, like we talked about, you played at the University of Washington 20 years ago and stuff. But is it amazing how just more national, all these, even Washington has become in a recruiting, side of, you look where Oregon recruits, et cetera. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think now colleges are so into finding the right fit for their program, right? And that always doesn't. There's always not enough kids within the state or 200-300 mile radius, right? They have to go elsewhere. And so when you think about it, you're right. It's just lines. And the biggest thing I think for young people, and I think some of the things JT was struggling with was, hey, can my family watch me play, right? How tough is it going to be? And that was a decision for a lot of our kids who leave is like, I want my family to watch me play. And if I'm across the country, that's going to be a little tougher for them. And so that's probably the biggest part when guys are trying to figure out what they're going to do and how far away they're going to go. But in terms of, I think as a 17, 18-year-old, 3 or 4 years seems like an eternity. Where a little bit older people like myself, that's obviously not that big of a time span when you talk about what you're getting done in that time frame and what you're getting accomplished. So, but obviously it's important to be around your family and have the ability to watch them or have them watch you play.
Hey, lastly, how much from your vantage point, because you've played college football, you coach college football, you're coaching high school football to a high degree now. How much is name, image, and likeness? What's it going to do, good or bad, do you think, for the youngsters? These guys are young men, but just what's your take on it, I guess?
I've been wrestling with this a lot in my mind the last couple of days and for a while. And there's obviously pros and cons with it, right? And I think the people who have good intentions, they're going to use it correctly, right? They're going to use it to the way it's intended. But the people who were breaking the rules before are just going to expand on that and do what they were doing anyways, right? And cross the new line. And so, but I do think that I think it's the right thing. I think the kids that, that their name's not on the back of their jersey, but their face is on a video game. Well, yeah, the video game's making a considerable amount of money or whatever it may be, or the jersey that's hanging up in the bookstore, whatever it may be, right? And so I'm really excited for them in that part, right? I think there's going to be a huge learning curve in terms of the business aspect of it, right? Uncle Sam's going to get his part.
Yes. You better know you have an Uncle Sam now. I think some of these youngsters don't, but go ahead. Yes.
And so I know schools like UW and Cal are forcing their freshmen to take specific classes that are going to help them through this process.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm all for it, right? And I think, there's always going to be people who are going to cross the line and do things like that. And I think that's what everybody's worried about, right? And that's, and I think people who argue that these athletes are getting $150,000 scholarship and they get all this, why aren't they just happy with that? Don't truly understand the process. Don't truly understand what happens, right? Like, I have used me as an example. I have 14 screws in my ankle for playing football at UW, right? Like, they've treated me great, but I'd rather not have 14 screws in my foot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, most people run that set off the metal detector when they go through the airport. Yeah.
And so, so there's going to be a learning curve. I think they're going to iron it out as they go. All the stuff is a little bit etched in sand right now. But I think the NCAA made the right decision.
Hey, if you already had a sponsor or if you already had a hookup already, of course, who knows where it's going, but I mean, are you amazed by, I don't know how much you're on social media and stuff, but are you amazed by how much publicity and whatever this decision got and the lead up to it? I mean, is it that's what's different even from your time too, because it was really coming along when you were being recruited, but now it's on another level, three other levels. Are you amazed by what brand these guys already have coming out of high school? Hey, there's another one. There's a name, image, and likeness future.
Yeah, that's
my grandson's here. I'm gonna get him on in a minute. Go ahead now.
He'll be 3 next month. He's the size of a baby gorilla. So,
but are you amazed by? I mean, JT already has a brand, to a certain extent.
He does, and I think, I'm assuming some of that went into his decision, right, of how he's going to expand that brand and how he is going to make himself marketable and all those kinds of things, right? And that's a whole different. I can't even wrap my head around that, right?
Yeah.
We used to make a joke. My dad used to make a joke that when I was being recruited, I had you 20 years too late, right? And so now it's like everything has changed. And so,
I had Urban Meyer on my podcast last week and we were talking about that very thing. And he goes, I'm not saying it's going to be, he said, I'm not saying it's going to be bad, but it's definitely going to be different. There's going to be a lot of chaos, especially in the beginning, when these kids, people like you were talking about a while ago, unscrupulous or scrupulous people are throwing money at you to do this, that, and the other. And how do you got to have somebody helping you through it. And I think the best thing is now they're going to have the ability to have that extra person in their life who maybe can help them navigate. Do you agree with that? I mean, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think because they're truly going into the business world right now.
Yeah.
They have to have somebody to lean on, and whether that be, I don't know, a family member or a business manager or whoever, right? And I don't know what percentage of people we're talking about, right? That's the part
Exactly.
I'm interested to see, right? Are we talking about, is it just going to be the quarterback or the high profile guys on the team? Is it going to be, I'm curious to see how all this is going to work in terms of, what does it mean for the kid who's playing golf or whoever, right? And so, there's probably more questions than answers right now.
Yeah, real quick before you go, the best thing about it though is if a golfer like at Ohio State wants to put on a clinic somewhere, and charge for it, for example, there's all kinds of ways you can like take advantage of this situation now, especially now that it's law in the state of Ohio. So finally the NCAA got off its duff after seeing this coming down the road for the last 8 years. But hey, last thing, I know I say that, but that's my calling card. But this will be my last thing. When people watch JT play football, what's going to jump out at them about him that's different from other players you've seen come through, other players you've played with, other players you've coached? What is going to be different about this man? Because it seems like when you watch him on video, he just sort of appears, at the scene of the crime, so to speak. But what's going to set him apart? What should people watch for more than anything else?
I would say because I've seen him in person so much, right? His ability to get 265, 70 pounds moving that quickly, right? So You may have heard of a guy by the name of Randy Hart.
Yeah.
Who I'm really good friends with and lives here in Seattle. His big thing was speed to power. And so, and when you get to where you're going, you have bad intentions and bad attitude when you get there. And that's kind of who JT is. And his ability to get off at the point of attack, have a collision that means something. And so, and he's really, really bright. He understands. He loves the game of football in terms of studying it and all those kinds of things. So
yeah,
I think he's going to do a great job. But in a nutshell, to answer your question, when he makes contact with somebody, it means something.
Yeah, I was going to say he'll have more than one move. Hey, by the way, Randy Hart, one of my favorite people ever. He coached at Ohio State when I first started covering Ohio State back in the 80s, early 1984. One of the more intense individuals too I ever met. You agree?
100%. So I played at UW, GA at UW. I was in his son's wedding, right? Him and his son are great friends, but Randy is one of the best people on the face of the planet. My friends and I who played still tell Randy Hart stories in terms of morning mat drills and stuff like that. And, as you get older, that cold, callous person you thought he was really just somebody who was preparing you for real life. And so I've gotten to know Randy quite a bit, and I really, really enjoy him.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell him Tim May said hi. I mean, he will remember me, I guarantee you. And number two, like you said, he put the mask on, when he was coaching, and he took the mask off when you were just talking with it. I mean, you know what I mean? And you got to do that, man. You sometimes got to be two people, or else you go nuts, But hey, ladies and gentlemen, Dominic Daste, you're now one of my favorite people, Dominic. I appreciate you joining me on the Tim May podcast, man. It's crazy what you can do in this modern age, isn't it? Even with the pandemic, you still have a face-to-face conversation.
Exactly. Well, best of luck to you guys all out there, and hopefully, if you guys make it out here soon, I think does UW play Ohio State?
I can't remember when they do. I think it's on the schedule sometime, but I can't. You're catching me off guard. I'm 67. I have a hard time recalling, but I do remember Randy Hart. But yeah, they'll be coming to the big screen there no matter what. Ohio State Buckeyes are going to be ranked in the top 4 of the country, and I'm telling you. Folks that don't know, JT's getting a heck of a run, man. And, teaming up with Jack Sawyer, this is the best defensive line recruiting class I've ever seen at Ohio State. And because the Bosas only came one at a time, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But Dominic, thanks for joining the Tim May podcast, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.